This is the first in a series of panels that we'll be doing over the next 5 weeks, broadly relating to the topic of food. Food, of course, is a topic that's on everybody's mind these days and in the news everywhere we turn. The programs that we're offering you are supported by a grant from Mizzou Advantage. As you know, this campus has an important strategic initiative called Food for the Future, which addresses the culture, economics, and production of healthy and affordable food. And so these panels spring broadly from that initiative. People from many, many departments around campus have been coming together for a year or 2 years, I don't really remember even when this got underway, to talk about the future of our food system. We began by considering the question, what is good food? Hopefully what you're consuming right now is good food. And we focus in our discussions about what is good food, that good food being what we hope the food system of the future will provide for us and for people around the world. So we focused on a project that was funded by the Kellogg Foundation, which came up with a list of what they call key attributes of good food. This is a few years old. So these key attributes of good food are that it is healthy, affordable, fair, and green. And so we're going to do a panel each of these few weeks on one of those topics. Today's topic is healthy food, next week affordable, then fair and green. And the fifth panel will be an attempt to wrap up what we've learned from all the topics. So good food, according to this definition or description, is food that is healthy, affordable, fair, and green. Nothing for us to disagree with there, I don't think. The problem is that these terms are not self-defining. We don't all agree about what healthy means. We don't all agree about what fair means. The terms are contested, and they are understood differently by people participating in the food system in different ways. So we hope that these discussions will help us to figure out where we have areas of shared agreement, we understand things the same way, and where we don't understand things the same way. And hopefully we can narrow those areas where we lack shared understanding. And then, in turn, we can be pointed toward fruitful avenues for research and teaching and extension and outreach kinds of activities. So that's sort of our hope. And in order to get there, we've decided in each of these panels to bring together a group of experts from many, many disciplines, including from the biological sciences, the social sciences, and the humanities, to consider the meanings of each of these terms. So as I've said, today's panel will discuss what we mean by healthy food, and we'll proceed in coming weeks through the other topics, and we hope that you'll attend as many of these sessions as you can. So, before introducing today's panel, I want just very briefly to mention the people who played a role in the process of planning this series. The planning committee has been led by Mary Hendrickson and Donna Murley. Other members of that committee are Debbie Kelly, Luann Roth, Cindy DeBlau, Luis Oxenia, Ray Massey, and Joe Dalgano. And the group organizing today's panel and choosing your panelists for you includes Donna Murley, Cindy DeBlau, Luann Roth, and Craig Payne. And I thank them all. Today we have 5 panelists. The format is that each panelist will speak for no more than about 7 minutes. It's going to be kind of a rapid-fire presentation. Each panelist will start by offering a definition, his or her own definition of healthy food, and will then elaborate on that definition. So we'll get those presentations moving pretty quickly and hope to save at least 25 minutes, maybe more, for questions and answers from you in the audience. So in the interest of time, I'm going to give very brief introductions to the panelists. I'm going to tell you no more than their name and their affiliation. Maybe they'll tell you a little bit more about what informs their particular perspective. So first, today we'll hear from Deborah Pearsall, a professor emerita of anthropology. Her presentation will be followed by Kevin Fritchie of the Department of Nutrition and Exercise Physiology, then Carol Lorenzen of the Division of Animal Sciences, David Goldstein, Professor Emeritus of the Health Sciences Center, and Lena Fulham, who is the food service director for the Columbia Public Schools. Debbie?
So in the discipline of anthropology, what is healthy food? When I had to write this, I found myself thinking as an ethnobotanist, someone who's interested in plant-people interrelationships. And so in our field, a healthy food is one that contributes to physical health, mental, emotional, and spiritual health, the good functioning of the social system, and the sustainable functioning of the food and nutrition system. And so let's focus in on a food and nutrition system. And I want to give you some examples of traditional food and nutrition system. What is this? Basically, we're talking about food, the plants and animals, knowledge about those species, practices, and all of these things in a cultural and environmental context. And I want to give you a couple of examples of the importance of knowledge, which may be part of this that you're less familiar with. So an example of traditional knowledge, for instance, understanding the effects of food preparation. And here you see an image of fish prepared with fermented breadfruit balls. Okay, so what part of the plant is eaten? We need to understand this because there's differences in nutrition. What variety is eaten? How are foods prepared? There are many differences in the nutritional content of food based on knowledge and practice of preparation. And what is eaten together? How are meals composed? Some other examples we may be more familiar with would be how spices add vitamins and minerals to your food, or how cooking corn with ash releases more nutrients. Another example of traditional knowledge in a food system are food management practices, such as some of the ones you see here: pruning, digging, weeding, transplanting, and so on. And as anthropologists, we know that active management of resources by native peoples has often not been recognized by historians, by scientists. European settlers, for example, in the New World, thought the Americas were largely pristine and wild, and that native people had a very light footstep on the environment. And they saw depopulated areas that looked natural, but were really regrowing agricultural fields and other kinds of managed areas. And we now have a much better understanding of this through, for example, studies of forest management. And here's just a few shots from the Maya area. I think we would all recognize the burned off plot as an agricultural field, but do you recognize the bottom one, a forest garden, as a managed agricultural landscape? So the point then that I'm making is that from the perspective of anthropology, ethnobotany, to understand food and health means understanding the whole food system, the plants, the people, the knowledge, the practices, and how these interact. And I just pulled this diagram from the literature showing the interactions of all these domains. Now, I'm an archaeologist, so what does archaeology have to do with any of this? Well, archaeology gives us some time depth on understanding the food systems, say, for example, in the Americas. And let me just end with a couple of points about, as an example, what we've learned from archaeology on how the origins of agriculture affected health. So, as many of you probably know, when the Europeans came to the New World, most Native Americans lived as agriculturalists. And were these foods healthy? Would we consider that the diets of the native peoples were healthy? And what we've learned from archaeology is there were multiple domestications of plants needed for nutritionally balanced diets. And just briefly, you can see some of the kinds of foods that were domesticated in the Americas. And I think it's obvious that we could come up with a lot of healthy meals based on these foods. Everything from avocados to chili peppers to corn, beans, squash, and a lot of root crops, for example. And from archaeologists, we know, in fact, that this is what happened, that in research here at MU, for example, at an archaeological site in Ecuador, we've got examples of all these domesticated plants came together and were part of the food system. Corn and root crops and vegetables and squashes, chili peppers, and a variety of wild resources. And I think it's worth noting too that corn was part of a very important part of cuisine in the past in the Americas and was eaten in combination with a lot of different food. So how healthy were these people? What were these healthy food systems? Well, we have to look at this in context, of course, and there's not enough time to look at any cultural or environmental context in particular. But we do know that agriculture fueled population growth. It was very good for our species, but it wasn't always so good for individuals or the quality of life. And this is one thing, again, that we've learned from archaeology. In relationship, say, to hunter-gatherer peoples, agricultural diets can be very challenging. Dental health, for example, is poor compared to hunter-gatherer health. Poorer growth and development, anemia at higher levels, and so forth. So just to sum up then, I think that as an anthropologist, I like to think about healthy foods in the context of a broader food and nutrition system. And we don't want to neglect the importance of traditional knowledge about food practices. Then I think you can make the argument that that knowledge is every bit as important as the species of plants, of the traditional varieties, is the knowledge about that plant. And finally, I think that agriculture is a practice of food production that sustains large populations, but does present health and environmental challenges. And that is, and if you're interested, I wrote down some references if you want those. Thank you.
So what I'd like to do is give you a little bit of perspective as a nutrition researcher. My area of expertise is actually fish oil and omega-3 fatty acids, which I think hopefully might qualify in the healthy food category. I actually found the assignment that we were all given to try to define what a healthy food, what we mean by that, to actually be the most annoying and difficult part of this, of accepting this offer to speak on this panel. So my definition is that it's those foods that contribute to meeting our overall nutrient requirements and promote health. So that's a simplified definition. But I did, when I was first given the assignment, I did what maybe a lot of you might have done, is I Googled it. Okay, healthy food, Google, see what comes up. Well, Wikipedia doesn't even have a definition of healthy food. I don't know why, but they don't. But I could find something from an online medical dictionary, and they provided some information about any food believed to be good for you. I thought, oh my goodness, it's about belief. As a scientist, I wasn't very comfortable with that. And but one aspect that this definition also included is that it's not only the nutrient composition of a foodstuff, but it also has to do with, it has to do something. It has to function. What's the outcome? And so most definitions of healthy foods do include some kind of descriptor of health, of, again, lower heart disease, less cancer, more energy, whatever the case may be. And depending on the audience and expectations, your laundry list of the kind of health outcomes you're looking for can vary. So when I looked into this and tried to look for scientific evidence about, so what is healthy food, what I found is that sort of a long-standing tradition that conceptually we talked about that there are no good or bad foods, that it's only your diet. So it has to be in the context that even in some diets, a Hostess Twinkie could somehow fit into a good diet. Okay? Because goodness gracious, we don't want to attack the poor Hostess people. Look, they're out of work now. You know, Twinkies are now being made by someone else. So this idea that all foods can fit into a healthy diet has really undermined our ability as people in the nutrition research community, as well as consumers, of really understanding or setting standards for defining what we believe. Can't we all agree what would be healthy foods, and maybe agree on what might be not so healthy foods? So we pretty much have reasonable agreement about what's unhealthy foods. Foods that are loaded with refined grains, fats, and sweets. And we understand that the reason why many foods are filled with these things is because they're inexpensive. They tend to make the food more palatable. And they also can be part of the convenience, which in our busy lives is an important factor. But so these energy-dense, nutrient-poor foodstuffs are pretty easy for many of us to spot. We could all come up with our own laundry list, and there'd be reasonable agreement around most of us in the room here, with some exceptions that would be notable. So this widespread agreement for what's nutrient-poor is fairly common when people go out and ask consumers about it. We're not only consumers, but actually the scientists who work in this field can strongly disagree. And that has to do with, well, what is a nutrient-rich food? How can we really define that? And so that's really the challenge. And one thing that we agree, most of us agree, is that it's not just a food that is low or free of sugar or a low-fat food. And certainly we've seen over the last 20 years an increasing number of options in the grocery store that are fat-free or low-fat, and yet the obesity epidemic continues to proceed unabated. So what I want to talk to you about is what I hope over the last decade or so, and maybe over the next decade, is a process by which we can use scientific evidence and information to maybe help consumers better understand what healthy foods are and how to make those choices. And this process is called nutrient profiling. So if you want to know more about this, you can just Google nutrient profiling, and you'll find all kinds of interesting sites about this. So again, it's basically just the science of ranking foods, based on their nutrient composition. So it turns out that there's actually I actually found more than half a dozen nutrient profiling strategies that have been offered up, and they've been offered up by a variety of organizations, as well as industry, members of the industry, the food industry, as well as some regulatory bodies have been trying to come up with their own nutrient profiling system. And again, some of these nutrient profiles, they focus primarily on nutrients to encourage, versus others focus more on the bad nutrients, the fat and the sugar. And then there are some that actually contain both of these. So this is just one example, and I think of one of the better ones, the nutrient-rich food system. And the thing that is nice about that is that, in fact, over the last few years, there have been a number of studies put together to try to compare, if you nutrient profile a bunch of the things in the grocery store and you have this scoring system, and then you let people choose the various things, does it help them make for a better overall diet? And so they've used this and tested it against the Healthy Eating Index, which is a nutrient diet approach to looking at healthy diets. And again, they've actually validated that there are 9 nutrients, to encourage, and 3 nutrients to limit. And if they focus on just these nutrients, and this particular system works well for people in Western societies, particularly in the U.S., and for other societies and other cultures, there may have to be differences. And part of this you'll see is that clearly there are some essential nutrients that are off the list, that aren't part of the list in terms of encouragement. Part of this is because it is these nutrients that they're saying that we should be encouraging is because they tend to be the ones that people have the most difficulty actually consuming a diet that is rich enough in those particular nutrients to meet a healthy diet. And the nutrients to limit, certainly those are characters that we are familiar with. So the long-term goal by the people in the nutrition and food science research industry is to try to come up with a nutrient profiling system which has been validated and actually demonstrated to be useful to consumers, and that if consumers follow this nutrient profiling system, they will actually end up being healthier because they are making better choices. So one of the things that is going to be the challenge, and maybe this is a good thing, it's going to provide employment opportunities for all kinds of people in nutrition extension and various forms of outreach and marketing. So again, we hope that it's not going to be so simple that anyone's going to be able to just do it without having any kind of background or explanations about how to use this system. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is just, again, I have there's a number of reasons why organic food production may be beneficial, but one of the ones where there's very little evidence to support organic food selection at the level of the consumer is because of the fact that people believe organic foods are more nutritious, they have higher nutrient profile. In fact, the scientific evidence does not support that conclusion. Again, not that I'm opposed to organic farming, it's just that it doesn't make that much difference in terms of nutrient content. So my main points is just that the idea that foods can't be categorized as either good or bad hasn't been a very helpful approach, and it's been one that we've been using for almost 30 years. And so my hope is that we will start moving towards a nutrient profiling system, one that has been appropriately validated and tested, and that the last point is that, again, even if you are a supporter and average and a regular consumer of organic foods, there's all kinds of reasons why that might be beneficial for sustainability and other reasons, but from a nutrition perspective, it really doesn't make much difference. So if you're going to support organic gardening and organic farming, great, but use the real science that supports it, not the nutrition argument. Thank you.
All right, I'm here representing the animal science group, and I have a couple of my students are here in the audience, and they know I'm really representing the beef industry, so I'll just say it right up front. So, in animal science, healthy food means a complete protein that's delivered in a tasty and appealing manner, and I realized when I sat down I forgot to put the word safe in there because we are very concerned with food safety. In addition, because we are stewards of these animals, of the livestock and the poultry, animal products that are produced in an efficient and sustainable manner also fall under healthy foods. So there are many nutritional reasons to eat red meat, in particular beef. It is packed with nutrients, and we can still find meat at an affordable price. It is a complete protein, meaning that meat and eggs and some dairy products can provide us with a lot of the amino acids that we need for our body. We get bioavailable iron, which actually the research shows that the iron we get from eating red meat is more available to our systems than what we even get from eating another iron-rich source such as spinach. It does provide B vitamins and zinc, and yes, I know thiamine is also a B vitamin, but beef is one of the best supplies of thiamine we can get in our diet, and CoQ10. By the way, that is what you normally hear from the beef industry when they talk about the good nutrition, right? We talk about our complete protein, our bioavailable iron, and the B vitamins and zinc that we provide. I wanted to show you a couple other, some newer information that's out there. One is a comparison of beef, pork, and chicken for their nutritional, what they provide in the diet. This is using a 3-ounce serving, as was brought up when we were discussing before the panel. How many of you eat a 3-ounce serving of meat? How many of you know it's the size of a deck of cards? It usually starts out at 4 ounces and it goes down to 3 ounces. I have been making a lot of recipes out of Cooking Light, and I can tell you all of their portions are 3 ounces. But the point of this slide, I want to leave it up here a little long enough so you can look at it, is that beef can very easily fall into a healthy diet when it's consumed in a 3-ounce portion. It's very comparable to everything else you see up there, and if you actually look at the one that's going to give you the most calories and the most fat and the most cholesterol, you'll see it's the skinless chicken thigh. Yeah, I have to admit, I like to say that. So, some of the more recent research that's out there is looking at the role of red meat or beef in aging and in the body's response to that. And so something that when I attended the International Congress of Meat Science and Technology last year that was brought up and shown to us is that dietary protein intake plus resistance exercise training can help maintain muscle mass in older people. So just to orient you to this slide, the white bars mean muscle protein synthesis. The black bars equal muscle protein breakdown. The gray bars equal your net protein gain of the muscle. You have a basal diet. You have the inclusion of or ingestion of just protein with amino acids. Then you have the REX, stands for resistance exercise, and then you combine it with the resistance exercise, and you can see that when you combine a protein diet with resistance exercise, you have the most increase in protein buildup in the muscle. We also learned that red meat is effective in increasing muscle protein synthesis compared to plant protein. So in this case, the white bar is the patients that ate beef, and the black bar are the patients that ate soybean, and they were either just fed that or they included exercise. Exercise does give you more advantage for increasing muscle protein synthesis, but in both cases, the beef was superior to the plant protein in increasing the amount of muscle that you would gain. Another interesting thing that this actually was compiled by Dr. Leidy in the nutrition department here at the University of Missouri, and she presented it at the Reciprocal Meat Conference last year. And a lot of people think when they're dieting and trying to lose weight that there are some other options, right? We want to drop fat, maybe, look at some other things. But the evidence is unrefutable that including a high protein meal in your diet is going to decrease hunger and increase fullness. And so you're going to have more satiety, so you can go a longer time in between meals. So it really does help you to have a high protein meal. Looking quickly at cognition, iron's role in cognition, it's required by certain enzymes, and this is a study that's been cited. This is using Kenyan school children. Have any of you guys seen this study before? This has been cited a lot lately. This is looking in the gray bars is the total score, in the black bars is the arithmetic scores, and then you see the diets on the bottom. So they have the meat is on the far right. Then they have, can't read it this far away. Something plus oil, milk, and then the control diet. And you can see on the meat diet, especially for total score, it's much higher when those children received meat in their diet on their total scores for testing. And zinc is also implicated in central nervous system development, which is important, of course, if you're expecting a child. Now, here's another reason to eat meat. This is what I love to say as an animal scientist. What's the best thing about the cow? The cow can take something I can't eat, lignin, grass, that kind of stuff, and convert it, cellulose, and convert it to something I can use. Meat, milk, and fiber. So it's a great way for us to turn something that humans can't use into something that humans can use. If you looked at any data, you see that the bulk of the land is really in non-productive, which is misspelled, forest and rangeland, and a lot of those areas can be utilized by livestock. The pounds of beef that we produce has increased over 12% between 1977 and 2007. However, the number of cattle it took to make those pounds of beef has decreased by 43%. When we continue to look at efficiency, these are just different measures of this. In every case, it's gone down. So the total energy requirement to produce a pound of beef the amount of feedstuffs we feed those cattle, the land needed, the water needed, and the fossil fuel needed to take care of those animals has all decreased from 1977 to 2007. I believe this is talking about manure and carbon footprint. They all decreased. So manure was on the last one. Methane production, nitrous oxide, and carbon footprint is on this one. So in every measure of efficiency that you could use that relates to sustainability or producing healthy animals, we have gotten more efficient in a 30-year time period than we were before in the United States. And just quickly to show you what the beef industry has done, the first time they did a market consist study to look at the actual, what we saw as a snapshot of the beef industry, and then compared to the last National Beef Quality Audit that was conducted in 2011, we see that all of our measures of fatness have gone down. Our fat thickness has gone down. Our Marling score, that's the intramuscular fat, has gone down. However, it has not gone down to the point where it's unacceptable. Our yield rate has gone down, but we've increased carcass weight and increased ribeye area as a measure of muscling. So cattle producers have been working very hard to be efficient, produce healthy, safe products that do work well in a healthy diet. Thanks.
I'm coming at this from the direction of the medical side. I'm a pediatric endocrinologist, and I've been dealing with diabetes and obesity and whatnot for almost 50 years now. I'm not sure I know more now than I knew when I started. So the question is, does food play a role in the development of chronic diseases? I want to tell you, I consider myself a foodie, and I hope the foodies won't be offended by some of the things I say today. And this is my contact information. At the bottom, you can see I have a website, and if you want to explore some of the things in more detail that I talk about, or things or that I don't talk about, high fructose corn syrup, obesity, diabetes, and whatnot, that would be a place you can find that information. If there are typos, I don't want to know about it. This is the definition I've come up with. It's imperfect, like all definitions of what's healthy food. Food that does not contain ingredients or contaminants known to contribute to adverse health outcomes. Can we actually define what's a healthy food? I don't think so. And this is a quote from the USDA from a couple of years ago when they were talking about whether food stamp recipients ate less healthy foods than people who didn't have food stamps. No clear standards exist to define food as good or bad, healthy or not healthy, so I agree with you, Kevin. We just don't know how to do it. It's healthy diets, whatever that is. So you already know, and one thing I know for sure, we're fat and we're sedentary. There's no question about it. And these are some lovely pictures that Cindy DeBlau helped put on my PowerPoint. I appreciate your help very much, Cindy. And the red is where the higher prevalences of obesity. And we already know all this stuff. More than 60% of American adults are overweight. 30, 40, 50% of children, depending on racial and ethnic backgrounds. It's astonishing. It's absolutely astonishing. And there's good news and bad news. The good news is the steadily rising prevalence of obesity in the U.S. over the past 50 years seems to be reaching a plateau. The bad news is we're still fat and sedentary. The average American exercise 1.25 miles a week they walk. That's it. If you put it all together, that's from your car to the mall and this and that. That's what we do. That's what we do. And it's astonishing. So why are we so heavy, fat, whatever you want to call it? Well, the simple answer is we take in more calories than we burn up. It isn't because there's bisphenol A in the water. It isn't. We eat a lot of food. We eat almost 500 calories a day more on average than we did 30 years ago. And there's a wonderful editorial by Frank Bruni in the New York Times the other day, Hard Truths About Our Soft Bodies. We look for lots of magical reasons why we have so much obesity. We eat too much. Now, the complicated answer of why we're so heavy is there are many genetic as well as non-genetic factors that have to be considered. It isn't just that we eat more than we need. The genetic factors are the bad news because we can't really modify those very well. Many different genes exert strong influences on body weight, and two of the best references, Ethan Sinn's prisoner studies, things you could never do these days with IRBs, telling us there really are big differences in people genetically that affect their likelihood to gain weight. And Stunkard studies on twins, identical twins raised apart, there's powerful genetic influences. The potentially good news is in the non-genetic factors that obesity is not inevitable in people who possess genes to promote obesity. And the Pima Indian studies are probably the best evidence. It's the Pimas who still live in the Sierra Madre, as opposed to those who live outside Phoenix. The Phoenix Pimas, same genes, highest prevalence of diabetes and obesity in the world. There isn't any of that in the Pimas in the Sierra Madre, even though they eat more than the Pimas in Arizona. It's the physical activity, may have something to do with diet composition, but being overweight isn't inevitable, even though you have the genes for it. So, what's so important about this overweight thing? I mean, is this really that important? Well, there is no question that obesity is a powerful risk factor for the development of serious chronic diseases, and we all know about these: cardiovascular disease, diabetes, even cancer, arthritis. To what extent diet composition plays a role in the development of these chronic diseases, independent of obesity, is very, very unclear. Very unclear. I believe that diet composition matters, but belief isn't the same as fact. So what should we do? I don't know. I don't, although we know a great deal about obesity and its health effects, we do not have particularly effective ways to prevent or treat obesity other than bariatric surgery. I was appalled today at the hospital. I saw an ad in our hospital, get bariatric surgery, the most effective way to treat obesity. Oh, come on. It may well be, but that's what we've gotten down to now. I mean, it's astonishing. I do not think we can legislate healthy eating. On the other hand, public policy can promote the benefits of healthy eating and physical activity, no question about it. In the end, it turns out to be more about personal choice than anything else, and that's going to be an enormous challenge for all of us. So, in summary, I think the food system provides ample food, which is more or less healthy and relatively inexpensive. We spend about 18% of income on food now. 30 years ago, it was almost 40%. There's no consensus among the experts about what's healthy and unhealthy, but at least there's a majority view of what constitutes a healthy diet. The single biggest challenge our society faces with respect to food is how to develop effective ways to prevent and treat obesity. Success will require major changes in public policy regarding food issues and in personal food-related decisions. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the practical aspects of eating and what's happening in your local schools. I'm the Director of Nutrition Services for Columbia Public Schools, just as a reminder. And I will start out with this dreaded question that we were asked to answer. What is healthy food? What does it mean? Foods that provide essential nutrients, energy, building blocks to support the human at an optimal level for disease prevention. But, with that being said, each individual has their own healthy food beliefs and focus, which is influenced by their present state of being, personal desire, and past experiences. And in a school setting, you can see it very clearly that this definition truly fits, and children are a reflection of their parents, which is also a part of our community. First, before I go into talking about what's going on in your schools here, of course, all school districts are different. They're different across the nation. However, I've been told by some that Columbia Public Schools is a great representation, actually, of a lot of the U.S. in general, only because we have so many different cultures in our school district. So I think that's good. But anyway, before I do that, I want to tell you exactly what we do and what kind of programs that we provide and how large we are, because I think a lot of people in this community especially if you've been in Columbia for a very long time. Many community members think that Columbia is very small still, and we are not. We're actually very large. We have a lot of students that we serve. But these are all the programs, the child nutrition programs that we provide. And I highlighted the fresh fruit and vegetable program only because it's my favorite. This is how many kitchens and sites that we actually serve. And these are the number of students, 17,722. That's how much we've grown. I've taken a huge leap in the number of employees that I oversee. It is 150 at any 55, 165 at any given time. Our free and reduced population, which is a huge indicator of poverty in our community, is 38%, and I'm asked that on a daily basis what our numbers are. And then our participation is about 49%, which is 8,300 students a day, is what we serve. Our budget's about $8.6 million. However, when you look at that first, we're serving about 1.6 million lunches. That's not breakfast, that's just lunches, because everybody wants to know about lunch, they don't really want to know about breakfast. That's actually down about 8% from the last 2 years, and I'll tell you a little bit about that and why that's happening. It used to be 1.8 million, and now we're down to 1.67. Oh, our funding is federal, state, the price of a lunch, and then any a la carte sales, which is our fundraiser. The new regulations, that's really the focus for USDA. We are governed by USDA. That's where our money comes from, primarily. What their focus was is all the items that you'll see on the left from the 1995 U.S. Dietary Guidelines. And you say, well, we're in 2013. Well, yes, and so finally they updated, and we are now actually up to the 2005 U.S. Dietary Guidelines, which are focusing on the items on the right as well as the items on the left. And those are the same items that are nutrients that Kevin had spoken of earlier. Those are the areas that are lacking in the U.S. diet. Our mission at Columbia Public Schools is all students and staff at Columbia Public Schools will have access to fresh, flavorful, nutritious meals daily while promoting local sustainability. Okay, well, healthy food. What's going on in Columbia Public Schools? What I'd like to say is we are under very, very strict regulations right now. Those new regulations that came out, I'm sure you've all heard of them. And you've probably seen some positive aspects and some negative aspects. That children are going hungry, or that, they're eating more whole grains, and a lot of that is true. We have a lot of varied socioeconomic backgrounds in our school. One of our schools only has 20% free and reduced, while another has 80% free and reduced. So we have pockets of poverty here in Columbia that are very astounding, actually. I think 80% versus 20%, where people are living, and it's really showing where pockets of poverty exist. There's a new push for updated, healthier foods. Again, the 2005 U.S. Dietary Guidelines is what we're under right now. Exposure and opportunity, that is really important to me. As a dietitian and as a food service director and overseeing child nutrition, exposure and opportunity is one of my biggest tools when we're talking about spreading the word about healthy food. Kids have to see it, they have to touch it, they have to smell it, they have to experience it, and they have to be introduced to it over and over in order to accept the food that you're offering them. And that's a hard sell, especially when you make big sweeping changes all at one time. Nutrition education is also an important aspect. The unfortunate part about nutrition education is that we have to be asked to come educate our students. Food safety is big, gotta serve safe food or people won't come and eat your food. We read labels and provide kids with foods that they will eat. So we basically read the labels for the parents. And so there's a huge difference between what is kid-friendly and what is parent-friendly. There's a huge difference. And the unfortunate part is many don't understand that we actually do the label reading, and we try to provide foods that are healthy that kids will actually eat. We limit influence of popular trends and social outcry. We basically stick with what USDA says we need to be serving, and that is research-based for long periods of time. So fad diets do not have a place in the National School Lunch Program. We have better programs, the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program being one of them, and I'll answer any questions about that later, but that's my favorite. Commodities are getting better. That's the way we keep the price of our meals down. We have lots of challenges, as I'm sure you might imagine, to balance the things that kids will eat. And I obviously got a phone call in the middle and didn't finish my sentence with what is healthy. Varied backgrounds, that's going to determine what they do like and what they're exposed to. Stigma of the lunch program, many people have that age-old idea of what lunch means and the lunch lady and slopping food and so forth, which is actually not true anymore. Budget constraints affect the quality of food, and it show you exactly where we're spending our money. The new regs said they were going to cost about $450,000 the first 2 years. And that is actually never going to go away. That's $450,000 that we will spend for the first 2 years and from the years to come, forever. And then it'll just keep increasing. So many students do not like the new food. There are time constraints, building infrastructure constraints. So anytime I want to put a new piece of equipment into a building to improve quality of food, I have to go through this major overhaul of making sure the electricity and the water will support it. Staff constraints, a lot of people don't know how to cook anymore. That's why the Food Network is so popular, because people like to watch it, they don't actually like to do it. There's a low interest in healthy foods, which is tremendously discouraging. So anyway, my main points are, and just in summary, is that there's been a program shift, and a lot of people don't realize that the National School Lunch Programs were actually initially formed to help serve the low economic echelon of our society. And now we are being charged with the task of student health, and budgets are not keeping pace with that. I am discouraged at the level of interest in healthy food. Budgets are tightening, and that affects us even when, let's say, city codes tighten, because they want to charge us for everything that they do for us. We cannot afford organic food. We cannot source 100% local, and even though we do local, lots of local, we can provide color, variety, safety, and exposure. And we have a lot of great new initiatives that need a lot of fine-tuning. So I think now, I guess I'll be turning that back over to Martha. Thank you.
Thank you all, panelists. We have a lot to think about. We're ready to take questions either from among the panelists or from the audience. If anyone is ready to ask a question, don't be shy. Panelists? Mary?
Well, I think that both David and Kevin mentioned this belief versus what we believe is good food versus what we may know what scientifically is good food, or healthy food, I should say. So I guess I'd like maybe a little bit more, how do you balance the belief and the scientific research in that, and how does that relate to kind of the food and nutrition system that Debbie mentioned, that that's a part of that food and nutrition system that provides it?
That's a great question. I think our anthropologist might be the best qualified to address that. And I think that's always the problem for, scientifically we can know things, but we know lots of things about how to eat healthier. And to me, one of the more interesting challenges that we have, anyone who's interested in this topic, is how do we get people to act on facts, scientific facts, versus it's like, well, I like chocolate ice cream. It makes me feel good. So I'm going to eat chocolate ice cream, and I don't care whether you tell me whether it's good for me or bad for me, because I'm going to do it. So I think that the interesting aspect of this, in fact, the whole program here, not just today's panel, is going to be to realize that food is more than just a bunch of nutrients that we need. Food, and that's the thing that makes food so important in our lives, because it has spiritual and emotional attachments to it. So heaven forbid, I would hate for us to have, if some scientist figured out exactly, we'll manufacture this chunk of stuff, and if you just eat that, you'll be healthy. I mean, who among us would say, oh, okay, great, well, that's what we'll eat, this chunk, the equivalent of, Purina human chow, okay? We would say, oh, that's wonderful that Purina's done that for us, but my goodness, is that, no one wants that. So there's always the issue of science versus belief, and there's other qualities of life issues. So I think anthropologically, maybe, do you want to add to that?
Well, let me just say that,
Excuse me, would you please repeat the question?
The question had to do with how to balance information from science with information that comes from our personal belief system, more or less.
and I mean, from my perspective, exactly what you've said, that if you're trying to shift diet, like getting school children more interested in the food you're presenting, I would think that you need to consider the background of the child, the traditions of the family, of the community, and so you're trying to address this problem in the broader cultural context, and that is very difficult to do, especially if you're trying to change behaviors. But the first thing to do would be to understand the behavior. So why aren't the children accepting the food would be a very good place to start. And then how can we shift desire, belief in a direction we want to, working within the very diverse context that you're presented with.
Anyone else? David?
That was a good question. From a health professional point of view, I still think that we sort of work around the edges on things. We all have our beliefs about this, and we all think there's some magical things if we just changed in the diet, that things would be better. Also, when people are on diets, don't eat wheat, don't eat this, or don't eat that, or it's all, we're all looking for some magic in this. Basically, we need to find a way, and this is very complicated, as a society, to understand more about how what we eat affects us, how to get more activity into our lives, and you're going to have to do it at the level of the family. You can't just get it all done at school. If at home, overweight kids have overweight parents who have overweight grandparents, and we just perpetuate things, and this is a terribly difficult thing. But we need to stop talking like if we only all didn't eat beef, or if we all just if we glugged
Hold her down.
if we glugged olive oil, or flaxseed, we would be okay. If we just, how many of you have read that book, Wheat Belly? Only one of you, my God, it's the national craze now. And this guy, wheat is evil. And by the way, at the end of the book, rice is evil too, so corn is evil, everything's evil. But we have to take a multi-pronged approach, and I think the health issues are really the most important. You know what the prevalence of diabetes is in the U.S. now? The grown-up kind of diabetes. You got to get overweight to get it, but you also have to have the genes. 25% of people over 60 have diabetes in certain ethnic groups. It's 50%. And in the general population, it's at least 10%. We're doing terrible things to ourselves, and we need to, in a multi-faceted way, find how to. And belief is okay, but we also have to counter that with some common sense. We need to eat less, and we need to have more physical activity. And, avoid poison mushrooms and bisphenol A and phthalates and food safety is another whole issue. That I don't like E. coli in my dinner. Bad E. coli, the good E. coli are okay, but there's plenty of E. coli in what you eat, by the way. Anyway, this is a tough business, but it needs to be. You can't be nihilistic about it. Okay, we have to all try to find ways to deal with these problems, but it isn't as simple as let's avoid this, let's avoid this, let's avoid this, let's avoid this.
Other questions? Yes, in the front.
Okay, it's kind of like a broad question, but for a college student, I think when you talk about protein, what's like an ideal lunch to have for a college student that's on the run and needs to make sure they're full and focused all the time?
You want me to answer? You can answer. The question is, what's the ideal lunch for a college student in terms of protein? I haven't a clue. I mean, we all have a pretty good idea, and the USDA has been very helpful in guidelines what constitutes a healthy diet. And you need 20-25% fats, you need 15-20% protein, the rest carbohydrates, but hopefully complex things. But there isn't any simple rule to follow. Unless the rest of the panel I mean, I don't know what to tell you, but you have a pretty good idea what's a healthy diet, don't you? Well, that's what you want to do. Now, a lot of us don't. How many of you went to Roots and Blues this weekend? How many of you ate, many of you, only healthy foods at Roots and Blues? Honestly, how many ate only healthy foods? It's very tough. And all that bad stuff, quote unquote, is so good. And I think the truth of the matter is you don't have to give up any of the things you like that are, quote, bad for you, but it's a question of how much and when and finding some balance in how you eat. But I can't tell you what to eat. I think you know what's healthy and what isn't.
Lena, I wonder, as the dietitian on the panel, do you have anything to contribute, perhaps from your experience with high school students, slightly different population than college students, but not so different?
Well, I would probably have to hark back as a dietetic student on what we would carry around in our duffels because we didn't have time to eat. Just a sandwich with meat in it is always good because you've got your carbohydrate, you got your protein, an apple. I mean, really, that basic stuff you've always seen in a brown bag there's nothing wrong with it, in my opinion. It's pretty balanced. Change it up here and there, but piece of fruit, if you can get a vegetable in there, a sandwich is great.
No sugary soda?
Well, water.
There's actually some pretty good new data coming out to answer your question about what's a meal that has some reasonably good protein is really important, and in terms of satiety and in terms of making you feel full and stay alert and all of those things. The single worst thing that we do in this country as a society is we've really screwed up breakfast. I mean, the vast majority of us really don't do what we should do for breakfast. A cup of coffee, and then at about 9:30 you get hungry, and then all of a sudden there's a Danish or something like that. And it's like, even a bowl of cereal with milk. An example I use in my nutrition class, complementary proteins, the amino acids in milk counter or balance some of the deficiencies of amino acids in the cereal grains. That's okay, but again, there's not enough fiber, there's not enough protein in that meal to really last till lunchtime. And we've got faculty here who are doing research on that, and the data are quite clear that the kind of meals that happen in Europe and that happen on rural traditional, you ask grandpa at the farm, they'd go out and work for an hour or two while the sun was just coming up, and then they'd have a 3,000 calorie meal for breakfast. I mean, oh my God, it's a heart attack on a plate. But in fact, it was the biggest meal of their day, or close to the biggest meal of their day, and lots of protein, some would say lots of fat, but they worked. They could burn off that extra fat. But again, so many of us aren't making good choices in the morning. And so even more important, because I teach a class that starts at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I can see it. I can see it in the students, and I can almost pick out which ones. I could ask them, sometimes I do before class, what their decisions were for breakfast. And they're the same ones who are drinking a Monster drink or a 5-hour energy thing, because it's like, they screwed up their metabolism from 7 a.m. or 9 a.m. Some of them don't get up till 9. Go ahead.
I have another question. What's the difference between grass-fed beef and non-grass-fed beef, and from a health perspective?
The question is about grass-fed and non-grass-fed beef. We were having this discussion before it started. Really nothing nutritionally. To get any of those benefits you see, I did a study with grass-fed beef looking at conjugated linoleic acid. The problem is, and Dr. Goldstein will tell you that the studies aren't conclusive as to how much you need for that to be beneficial, which I agree with. But if you look at the health studies that have been done, for you to get as much CLA out of grass-fed beef, and if you included grass-fed dairy products, you would have to eat so much of it that the calories you consume would have a reverse effect. So nutritionally, there's really no difference.
Sorry, what's CLA?
Conjugated linoleic acid.
It's an omega-3.
No, it's not an omega-3.
Well,
Sorry,
it's
Dr.
sort of like,
Goldstein.
it's sort of, isn't it?
No, it has some properties. Again, it's one of the reasons why grass-fed beef is supposed to be better for you, healthier for you.
But it's not.
But it's not. And the other thing about grass-fed beef is you have to understand that all beef is grass-fed. The only thing we're talking about is the last few months of their life, whether they go into a feedlot and are fed corn in order to get them fatter.
And that's
Okay, and corn is a family. It's in the grass family, but so from a nutrition research perspective, the data aren't very good. The grass-fed beef people, there's other reasons why grass-fed beef may be more sustainable or have a less impact on the environment, and we can have those discussions. But from a nutrition perspective, it doesn't stand up very well to actual scientific scrutiny.
However, if you prefer it, eat it.
But don't overcook it. Is it ALA isn't omega-3?
It is. It will have ALA, but not CLA.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Sorry.
stand corrected. Back to the student's question. One of the most useful things you might do, if you can find a way, is put together a 3-day food diary and then find a dietitian to go over it with you. You'll get a very good sense of whether the dietitian thinks you are overall eating a healthy, whatever that means, diet. And one thing I would point out from a physician's point of view, you don't need a lot of protein in your diet. It's true, a lot of protein cuts appetite some, but the experts say 15 to 20% of your diet is calories as protein is plenty.
Gentleman in the blue shirt.
What's happening with food allergies? Just from a general standpoint, it seems like there's more peanut, wheat products, dairy, et cetera, Are we really experiencing more allergies? Does that mean there's a change somewhere in the system, or are we just being clearer on what's happening? So what about that?
Do you want that one? You're
Both,
the one
how
who
do you
deals
do
with them.
Well, I can.
Question is about food allergies.
Food allergies.
I can tell you practically what is going on, but I can only tell you what I suspect is that diagnostics are better, and I think that they're finding it more readily rather than letting a kid go to school and all of a sudden they have an anaphylactic shock. But it is definitely increased. The other dietitian that I work with, we both think that we're back in the clinical setting because we are treating some severe allergies where you have to have classrooms that don't allow certain things, or you have to make sure a child is not sitting at the same table with certain other children, and eventually we'll have to have those items taken out of our school altogether, I believe, because it's happening in other schools. It hasn't happened at Columbia Public Schools yet, but I don't know why that is happening, but I think diagnostics is a part of it. As far as a system change, I don't know. Is there anybody else that wants to?
I don't think there are much in the way of good data to suggest that there's an increase, but I think you're right. The diagnostic, for example, celiac disease, which is a gluten intolerance to gluten. Now, a lot of people think they're gluten intolerant anyway, and you can't demonstrate celiac disease. And celiac disease is increasing slightly in the population, but it's better awareness. It's 1%. In the diabetes kids, it's 2 or 3%. But we're not really seeing more, but we certainly know how to diagnose it better. And then if you live in California, Almost everybody there thinks they have an allergy to some kind of food.
That's scientifically based.
Yes.
So my research is in immunology and how nutrition impacts our immune system, and I would say that I would agree with Dr. Goldstein that the data are not suggesting that there is a significant increase. It's maybe going up a little bit, and we think we may understand why that is. The number of parents and number of children who are mostly it's the parents claiming their child is wheat allergic or milk allergic or whatever, is hugely going up. And the Wheat Belly book is a good example of, again, someone attacking a particular foodstuff, and then all of a sudden the number of people who are like, well, maybe my headaches are related to that, or maybe my asthma is related to that. And again, the science isn't there to really support it. I personally know of several parents who have their children in our Sunday school program who say, well, my kid can't have wheat and so on and so forth. And it's like, but the kid's never been tested. And the chances are, if they did test them, they wouldn't find any obvious food allergy. People who react badly to milk are not allergic to milk. They don't have lactase enzyme in their intestine, and so they get gas and bloaty and maybe diarrhea if they drink milk too much. This happens the older your children you get, or if you're not of Northern European descent. We have many more children in our school system who are not, from Northern European descent, and as a result, milk is not something that they should be encouraged to eat because they aren't at home. Because if they drink it, they won't feel very good. That has nothing to do with an allergy. That's to do they can't digest it properly. So I think there's an awful lot of hysteria going on right now about food allergies. Maybe some evidence of a little bit of increase, but again, it's I really am concerned about the fact that we are overreacting to some things. And again, are we going to get rid of wheat in our school lunch programs because some parents or kids are claiming that they have celiacs or that they have allergies to wheat? It's concerning.
Young lady.
My question is for Dr. Lorenzen about the beef.
Mm-hmm.
With regard to the more efficient beef raising in the United States since 1977, what is the role of growth hormones, antibiotics that the farm animals are consuming and the health impact on humans?
Repeat the question.
Huh?
Repeat the question.
Repeat the question. The question is, basically, what are some of the technologies we're using, and how do they impact the efficiency of growth? That efficiency that we see in that has, some of those things were already around in the 70s, right? It has nothing to do with those things. It has to do with our improved genetics. So what you really see from that time, 77 to 2007, is we moved in a lot of the continental European cattle breeds, which are much larger, and they, we have pushed them to be faster growing. We do know more about the diet and how to feed them. I'm not going to tell you we don't use growth hormones. We don't use antibiotics except for if animals are sick. Antibiotics have been out of the system probably for a decade. You're really not supposed to be feeding it. Now, I'm telling you that as an animal scientist and the child of a vet. So my definition of an antibiotic is much different than the FDA's. Because we are using some things like Rumensin, Monensin, some things that will get rid of coccidiosis, right? Which is, to not get too technical, it's not quite like worms, but it's close to that.
Parasitic
It's
disease.
parasitic disease, right? So we feed that at a low level to keep those animals from getting the parasites. Now, I will tell you, when I spent some time at USDA, I was stunned that they consider that an antibiotic. But they do. So we are feeding things that prevent parasites and some things that modulate the rumen, which has 4 stomachs in it and keeps the acids in the rumen in balance. But we are not feeding antibiotics unless they're sick, like oxytetracycline, chlorotetracycline, the kind of things. And we aren't even allowed to use the things that we use in the human population anymore. Does that answer? because some people, and I should say, you can also look on the label for that. So there are different levels of animals, different levels of labels that will tell you what's been done to them. So they're called production claims. So organic, they've never had any antibiotics. I know that it's great for some other things. It's probably, but you're not even allowed to deworm those animals or give them inoculations when they're born. Okay, I just got a puppy. Kevin's heard about it a lot. It's 4 months old now. It's very cute. My puppy has already had 6 sets of shots. It's been dewormed more than once. Okay, that's the way I'm taking care of a puppy. A kid, you do probably even more than that, right? And so, in my opinion,
We didn't deworm our kids? I didn't know that.
maybe. Sometimes I wanted to worm. It would help with weight loss, but. Having raised livestock, I think it's unconscionable not to give them the inoculation so they don't get sick when they're younger. But we have different levels where those aren't even given. And then we have levels where, say they got sick and you had to treat them, they'll fall to a different level. There's the naturally raised claim you can use on them. There's the never ever 3 claim, which we usually don't see in the United States. That stuff goes to Europe. That means they're never fed antibiotics, never given growth hormones, and never fed ruminant byproducts, which they can't be fed anyway. And so some of it is you can look on the label. If you're really concerned with that, then that may be a reason to buy organic meat. Wait, he wants to.
Just to follow up, this is a controversial subject, particularly antibiotics in animals and the human antibiotic resistance. The Diane Rehm show last week had a long piece about this. If you're interested, I would listen. I think it's dr.org. You can listen to it online and make up your own mind about it. It's interesting.
Dr. Parasol, thank you very much for your comments about traditional knowledge and how important those are for healthy foods. I was just curious, in light of the scientific perspective that we're getting, is there a way to incorporate traditional knowledge in a way that can support or improve some of our more industrial, modern food production methods?
Yes, I think so.
Repeat
And
the question.
oh, sorry.
About incorporating traditional knowledge into decisions in the modern
Modern practices. I think there are many applications, yes. And as a matter of fact, although it's not my line of work, within this broader field of ethnobiology, there are researchers who work with indigenous communities who wish to change their diets to improve the health. So some of these communities that have higher diabetes rates and other health challenges, they can work with an anthropologist to learn their entire system, to be able to express the entire system, to talk to elders about prior practices that may have died off and so forth. And there are researchers who do these kinds of studies to help communities move in a direction they want to go in as far as their own health. And they may have all kinds of different desires. They may wish to retain traditional ways of doing things. They may wish to be able to fit into the larger communities more effectively. But I think there probably are some lessons that could be generalized for management practices. One thing that popped into my head when you're talking about corn versus grain versus grass-fed beef is I could think of examples where probably the grass-fed is more environmentally detrimental than feeding the animals in a barnyard. So I think some of these traditional practices, we don't want to make too many assumptions or try to generalize too broadly. But I think that. I guess that's all I have on that. Did anyone else want to comment?
Completely unrelated. When 10% of the general population and 25% of people over 65 have diabetes, is that what I heard?
Over 60 people.
Over 60 years old have diabetes. I don't think that personal choice is the answer to fixing the problem. So I wanted to engage in a conversation about what sort of systems level changes we could make support healthier lifestyles. And I would like to point to Columbia Public Schools as an example of something, as an organization that's doing something at a bigger level that goes towards that goal. So I don't know if you want to talk more about that, Lena, or if you want to brainstorm other systems level approaches we could use. But when it comes down to, if I'm living in a system that doesn't support, having a healthy lunch because I'm a busy student, that's not an individual choice problem. That's a systemic society level problem.
So the question is about the difference, where does the role of personal choice begin and end versus the role of system design, that sort of thing? Lena, anybody?
Well, I would comment on that kind of broaches the subject of legislating health, and I'm kind of anti-legislative health. I think that people do need to make their own decisions about what they're eating. I think it's important. When you say system, yeah, we probably could improve some of our systems, and we do at Columbia Public, but maybe not in other circles, maybe not the University of Missouri, I don't know. I haven't been on campus in forever. But I think personal choice is going to have to be a part of it because if not, the person's just simply not going to eat it. An example is flavored milk. Columbia Public Schools. Dairy Council has said, suggested with their studies over and over that flavored milk, if you take it out of the schools, that milk consumption will continue to drop and drop drastically. And so a little spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down in that case. And if you're saying that, a little too much sugar in the diet is bad for kids, well, not drinking milk is worse. So I think that you have to lend personal choice, but in balancing maybe what's environmentally stimulating for people and what choices are out there. There didn't used to be a fast food joint on every corner, and now there is. I think at a different level, stress, societal stress is a huge issue as far as being too busy with too much to do and not enough time to do it. That affects, I think, eating patterns big time. So that's a whole nother conversation.
When I said it comes down to personal choice, I didn't mean that there weren't things that we could do to modify the kind of choices you end up making in terms of how you eat. I mean, getting diabetes requires the genes and requires you getting overweight, and you get overweight because you eat too much. And I didn't mean it in a simple way. There are many, many things that we can do in terms of public policy and what we education. So I would look at the personal choice in a more broad way than I maybe made you think.
I'll just point out one study that I've looked at too that has to deal with personal choice, and that is providing menu information like at the fast food places, and they found it really makes no difference. It doesn't change buying patterns. So people go in and they know what they want to eat anyway. I mean, they're not going to McDonald's to be on Weight Watchers. They're going to McDonald's because they realized 10 minutes ago they wanted to have a quarter pound of cheese, and it doesn't matter how many calories it has. And there is some research. Have you seen that research, Dr. Fritchie? There is some research that shows that people are just going to get what they want to get, even if you give them the nutritional information. And very few people use food labels in the grocery store.
Those same studies, they decided Subway was healthy for you because of all the ads. But when you looked at the composition of what they actually ate, it was worse than if they had gone to McDonald's.
On that happy note.
Can I say one thing on this?
Yes, please.
Okay. Let me just say that I think you have to look at the whole food system, because when we talk about choice, if there's no grocery store with fresh vegetables that you can get to because maybe you're dependent on public transportation, then what does choice mean?